Hi everyone, so welcome to Co-op from UNSW's webcast. My name's Sam. I'm going to be taking you through a run-through of the application process for Co-op and give you some tips and tricks along the way. So to begin with, you'll notice on your screen that there is a little live chat box on the right-hand side, I believe it should be. If any time during the presentation you want to ask a question or you're unsure about something that I've said, just chuck that question in the chat box and I'll answer them all at the end. So feel free to do that. So a bit of an overview of myself to begin with. So as I mentioned, my name's Sam. I'm a third year co-op scholar. I'm currently studying co-op in finance and banking, and I'm working at the moment doing my second placement at UBS. So that's a bit about who I am. In terms of who the co-op program is, the main idea of the co-op program is to connect students with the university with industry players. The idea being that when you graduate, you have an abundance of experience that makes you a better graduate and ultimately more employable. And you can greater fulfill your potential to secure those jobs that you would like to. The specifics of the program: there's over 150 leading companies across a wide array of fields, from finance to engineering to more mathematically inclined programs. There's a broad range of companies that you could be placed at during your time as a co-op. Your placements themselves will total 9 to 18 months worth of industry experience, and during that time you develop significantly as a professional. In addition to this time on placement, there's also professional development offered by the co-op program, as well as leadership training, networking and mentoring, and of course the scholarship money which you receive during your time as a scholar. The idea is that all of these components together result in that one outcome of you being a better graduate and a more employable graduate. So a brief overview of the sponsors that we have at the moment. So obviously on the screen you can see a number of well-known companies, from your finance firms like UBS and Citi, to your software firms like Atlassian, to a number of consumer firms, so your Jaguar, your Land Rover, amongst others. So during your time as a co-op, you'd be placed at the type of sponsors which fit your field. So for example, for a finance scholar like myself, I'd have the opportunity to go to a bank or an asset manager, whereas for an engineering scholar, you'd obviously be placed with an engineering company. The more consumer-based companies like a Porto or McDonald's or Jaguar, you're obviously not going to be working behind the counter in those shops. You're going to be doing a role such as engineering, marketing, or accounting, which is useful for those firms if a little bit out of their actual business area. So in case you missed it, our first hangout, you can check out the link that's on your screen at the moment. That'll also be posted in the description box below. And that gives some more great useful information about the co-op program and the application process. So going through now a bit of the application process. The first thing to note is that registrations are open now, and they're actually only open for a few more months. So the number one most important thing, that if you get nothing else out of today's presentation, is that you should start your application and your registration as soon as possible. So the first page that you'll see when you're registering is a page which goes through who you are and what you're registering as. So first up, it'll ask whether you're a high school leaver or a current gap year student or a UNSW student. And so just select the relevant one for you. If you're looking at an old version of the website, it may come up with a faculty engineering rural scholarship. Note, as you can see on the screen, that screenshot, that scholarship's no longer run through the co-op program. So if you're looking at any old material, that's no longer run through the co-op program, but it still exists. So check out the UNSW scholarships page as a whole, and you'll be able to find information on that. The next stage of the co-op program, and a question that we get asked all the time: can I still register if I don't have a UAC number? You can, and the idea is that you put in your Board of Studies number or your interstate equivalent of Board of Studies number or International Baccalaureate number with a 1 preceding the actual number. If you've done that already, then what you need to do, once you have that UAC number, you need to go back into the UNSW Co-op website and change it to your UAC number. This is really important, as without doing this, you're not going to be able to actually accept a degree, because we won't know who you are, and there'll be a mismatch between your UAC and the place that you've potentially been offered through the Co-op program. So it's imperative that you do that, otherwise you may not be able to get into the Co-op program, even if you've passed the interview and such with flying colours. So remember to submit that before you submit your application. Okay. So the next part of the application, you'll see an overview screen, which basically is a dashboard of where you're up to in your application. So you've got the first part, which is the complete your profile section. That basically goes through the dashboard for you to have a look at your password, contact details, all those basics. So just make sure those are filled in and accurate, and if they change during your time as a co-op, or as a co-op applicant rather, just go back in and change them and keep them up to date. So you'll also see on the left hand side a menu of all the different steps and parts of your application. The idea here being, again, keep them up to date, and this is going to be where you click to go through and actually fill out your application. Finally, down the bottom on the left, you'll see a summary, which just gives you an overview of what you're actually applying for. So make sure that it's got the right stream that you're going through, whether you're a university student or a current gap year student or a high school student. Just check that that's correct, or otherwise, again, even if you pass and get in with flying colours, the admin will say no and you basically won't be able to be offered your scholarship. So just ensure that it's correct. The bit that's circled now on the right hand side of the dashboard, that tells you where you're at with your application process. So obviously by the end of your application, you'll have all ticks down that side of the screen. But the idea here, as you can see, you don't need to fill out all of the things chronologically. You can go through and fill out some of the some parts of your application and then go back and change them, or you can start with things where you have all the details at the moment. So the first part of the application itself, your supporting documentation. The main things that you need to submit as a supporting documentation is your school's assessment page, or if you're currently on a gap year, an explanation for what you're doing on your gap year. The main thing to note here is that you really need to get on top of the school's assessment page ASAP, because ultimately what it requires is you to talk to your academic coordinator at school or your careers advisor, whoever might be the person who best suits this role for you. Talk to them, because they're going to need to fill out a school's assessment of you. And ultimately this can be the bit that makes your is the biggest drag on your application, just because it's out of your control in terms of timing. So if they're being really slow, then you can't submit your application because they haven't given or submitted that page. So you can submit that page, I've just been told.
You can submit your application.
So you can submit your application now. However, it won't be considered complete without that school's assessment page. So make sure you've done that. If it's a gap year explanation, so basically just explaining what you're doing on your gap year, then that's obviously in your hands. So just fill that out when you fill out the rest of the application. So next up, your program preferences. You can select up to 3 program preferences. However, when you're doing that, make sure you only actually apply for programs you're interested in. Additionally, if you're in an interview setting and you have, say, software engineering, accounting and finance, a question that you'll likely be asked is, you've got really different fields here, like they don't really relate. How committed are you actually to one of those fields? So consider that when you're doing your application. However, if you do have a genuine interest in those disparate fields, then it's fine to put them as preferences. Put those preferences in the order that you most want to pursue that co-op. So your first one will be your first preference, and the third one, obviously, your last preference. You don't have to put in multiple preferences. If you're only interested in one program, then only apply for that one. You'll then have an explanation of an opportunity to explain rather why you've chosen those programs. So this is an opportunity for you to give your reasoning and your thought process behind those programs, and ultimately it's going to ensure that the programs that you have entered are actually the ones that are right for you. Now, a lot of the names of the programs can be similar when you're at high school and you haven't started university, so something like finance and accounting sound very similar. The best way for you to develop an understanding of the differences between, say, finance and accounting would be to go onto the UNSW Handbook website, have a look at the types of courses that might be offered in each of those programs, and develop a better understanding of what accounting means, what finance means. And by doing that, you'll be able to better select a program which means what you say it means. Additionally, on the Co-op Program website itself, there is a detailed explanation of what each stream entails. This is particularly relevant because for something like marketing and finance, obviously they seem very different. You actually graduate with the same commerce degree. So the idea being that you pick a major which is in a discipline that is your co-op program. So this can all seem a bit confusing. The easiest thing to do is just to jump on the co-op program page, research the program that might be right for you, and then apply for that program. Down the bottom of the page, you can see a checkbox, yes or no, whether your answer to the question is complete. If you say no, it'll basically just remind you that when you go to submit your application, if you haven't checked it as yes, that you've still actually got this bit outstanding and that you want it to review your answer here. Next up, you'll see a page which goes through the various application questions. So obviously here you can see there are 8 questions that you have the opportunity to answer. And additionally to those 8 questions, there are tips that come up on the right-hand side, which will be very useful for you in explaining what the question actually means, and some hints that will help you answer that question. One of the major things, or most common things that I get asked when I'm talking to prospective co-ops about the application questions is, I don't know what to put in. I'm going to put a list of everything I've achieved in high school, and I think that's the best thing for me. Ultimately, the best thing that you can show us is that you've had experiences, but what you've learned from those experiences. I think if you can show that as an applicant, then that's going to be really helpful for us to be able to assess you. So that's the number 1 tip that I have for the actual questions themselves. The next page that you'll come across is your educational background page. Now, here it's going to ask you, firstly, your UAC preferences. So for your UAC preferences, once upon a time you had 8 preferences. These days you only have 5 preferences. And the big thing here is students ask, or they say rather, look, I've only got 5 preferences. I don't think I can fit co-op in, or I want to put other things in. It's annoying to be able to have to put in a different UAC code for co-op itself. The big thing here is to remember that you can actually change your UAC preferences right up to January. I believe it's mid-early January. And the idea is that you need to have co-op as your preference if you accept a co-op scholarship. So if you get offered a co-op scholarship, but you have UCID engineering as your number 1 preference, then UAC won't compute with co-op and won't compute with the UNSW systems, and you simply won't be offered a place in the co-op program as you're not registered to do that degree through UAC. So the best thing that you can do here is right from the get-go, put that co-op stream and the UAC stream, which corresponds to the co-op program you're applying for, as your number 1 preference in the preferences, just to make sure that it's there for when you need it. But as I said before, remember you can change these preferences all the way through. So yeah, obviously it's up to you where you preference your co-op program, but I put mine at number 1 and it was useful for me, but ultimately make that decision for yourself. Okay, the next part of the application is your co-curricular activities question. So the first big thing to know about the co-curricular activities questions is that there's a drop-down menu. And so that means when you're searching for a sport or you're searching for Duke of Ed, sure, it's going to come up, click on it, perfect, you've done that bit well. But there are actually maybe a number of other things in that drop-down menu which you hadn't even thought of as co-op activities that you've, co-curricular activities rather, that you've done. So the easiest way, type in A, look at the activities which come up for A and which you might have done, and select the ones which you have done. After you've done that, there's additional co-curricular activities below, a box to be able to enter them, for anything that you might have done which isn't listed on the list. Again, you'll see down the bottom the yes or no checkbox. That'll give you an opportunity to tell for yourself a little check whether you've completed the question. Next up, you've got your educational background. So here you're going to be entering the marks and results that you've got during your Year 11 and 12 assessments at school. So the first thing to note here, and what's quite important and can confuse a lot of people, is that you need to have every single column, every single box that you've started filled out, otherwise the page won't let you submit. So say you picked up mathematics extension in Year 12, and you've still got those Year 11 boxes, just put a dash in those boxes, as obviously the subject didn't exist when you were in Year 11, or you weren't doing it when you were in 11. Just put a dash to ensure that every row that you've started has something in every box. Additionally, when your HSC trial results come out, if that's before the application date, then make sure you enter them in the system, in the relevant box. If your trial results aren't out by the time you submit, then all you have to do is just give a little explanation in the results explanation box. If you've already completed your HSC, so if you're applying as a gap year student, then you can enter your actual HSC results. And so go through and do that. So a bit of a summary, the key tips and things that you need to do is firstly to get started ASAP, to register ASAP, just so that you're in the system and that you've started the application process. Because ultimately there are a lot of boxes that you need to fill out, and the earlier you get started, the easier it is to make sure you're submitting that on time. Something that I think is really useful for everyone to do, when you're answering the questions, do it in a Word document originally. So copy and paste the question into the Word doc, write your answer, check the character limit, make sure it's all okay, and then go and copy and paste that into the online portal. The reason being for that is it's easier to edit. You can see them all on one page. You can print it out, show it to your mum, show it to your teacher at school, and get some feedback on your question. The next thing to do is to complete the school's assessment. So you need to submit that to your careers advisor at school, because as I've said before, your application isn't considered complete until your careers advisor has submitted that school's assessment. So it's really important that you get that done ASAP, both from your perspective because you needed to complete your application, also from your careers advisor perspective, because if they could be getting 20 kids from your grade at school applying for co-op, and they've got a whole lot of these to write. So from their perspective, it takes quite a lot of time. So make sure you get that into them as soon as possible. The next step is to review your application. Make sure there's no spelling mistakes. Make sure there's no grammatical errors. Make sure that it says exactly what you want it to say. Make sure it's very clear. And ultimately, get someone to read through it at the end to check with you that you actually do know how to spell and that your grammar's actually all right. The final thing to note is that this application is your opportunity to boast. So there's no room for being polite and being really humble here. We want to ultimately know how good you are and why we should be giving you a co-op scholarship over everyone else. So if you want more tips on the application, there's another application tutorial link that you can see on the screen. We'll also have that in the description below. So a timeline of where we're at the moment. So if you didn't, the UNSW Open Day on September 2nd will be able to give you some more insight into UNSW and why it's a great So firstly, it is July, in case you were getting worried. It's not August yet, your exams aren't that close. Then Open Day is actually on the 1st of September and UAC closes on the 28th of September. And co-op applications also close on that 28th of September. So to recap, Open Day on the 1st of September, UAC applications and co-op applications both close on the 28th of September. In terms of the rest of the process, by November, you'll know whether you have been successful in getting an interview for co-op. If you have been successful, you'll know and you'll be invited to an interview briefing day. This is the day before your interview where basically we give you an overview of what the potential things that you could be asked in your interview and just some handy tips and tricks for interviews. So obviously this timeline is a little bit out of date. We'll upload a new version of this timeline online, so you can, and you've accepted it, because of course you're going to accept it, then you can just have to make sure, a last check, that if you are going to accept that offer, feel free to type them in the chats box. Okay, so we've got two from Helen. Hi Helen. So the first thing, do I need to have the program I am applying for under co-op as one of my UAC preferences? The answer for this is yes. You can put it as whatever preferences you like. However, ultimately, if you go through and want to accept your co-op placement, that UAC preference has to be your first one as at the final close date in January. Helen's second question, I don't have a UAC number, how can I start my application? So, as I mentioned earlier, if you don't have a UAC number now, you can still get started on your application. All you need to do is enter your Board of Studies or IB or interstate equivalent of Board of Studies number with a 1 before it. Just make sure that when you go through and you get your UAC number, you change that in the system. Okay, I'm assuming there are no other questions then. If you do have other questions, feel free to check out our website first and foremost. There's a whole lot of information on that website, and if you think something still isn't covered there, then you can contact the co-op office to clarify. Finally, a few other FAQs that I get all the time when I'm presenting at schools. First question is about dual degrees. So initially, you can't study a dual degree with co-op just because of the timing commitments with regards to placements. However, as your degree progresses, that's a conversation you can have with the co-op office about whether it would potentially fit into your degree and how it could be possible. However, initially, you can't study a dual degree with co-op, and your UAC preferences need to reflect that. And on top of that, there's no time any guarantee that you would be able to. So if you're really keen and you only want to do comm law, for example, then you're not going to be able to do that with co-op initially, or whatever for law. So law, that's another question that I get asked all the time. Can I do a dual degree that involves law? At no point during a co-op will you be able to do that, simply because law takes up too much time as a degree and it doesn't fit in with the placements. So just keep that in mind when you're applying. Another really common question, can I defer my co-op offer? It's a flat out no here. You can't defer a co-op offer. You have to uptake that offer during the year that you're offered. However, there's no reason why you can't apply again the next year. So really common example here, we have a student who, say, was accepted, has rather been offered a co-op in their final year of school, and then they've decided to take a gap year. They can't defer that offer, but what they can do is apply again once their gap year is coming to an end in the next year's intake, and ultimately they've now got a whole lot more experiences they can talk about their gap year, and if anything, it even adds to their application. So that brings me on to obviously the next question, gap year. Yes, you can take a gap year, you can't defer your offer, and you just need to apply in the year preceding the year that you're going to start at uni. So with a question that we also get asked, can I combine co-op with other scholarships? Yes, you can combine it with other scholarships. In terms of AAA and Scientia, you can only combine it with one of these scholarships if you're offered both plus co-op. So just keep that in mind. For other scholarships, they might have their own criteria which prohibits it. However, in my experience, generally you can combine most other scholarships with co-op. However, you'll just need to check that for yourself on the scholarships website. Final FAQ that always comes up, bonus points. So bonus points from elite athletes and performers, and the bonus ones that you get for doing well in a subject are not considered by co-op. So you need to meet the minimum co-op cutoff, which is either 96, or if the degree that you're entering in is higher. So for example, commerce is normally 96.3-ish, then 96.53, then you need to meet that cutoff criteria. And your bonus points will not be considered for meeting that cutoff. The only bonus points that we do accept EAS, Educational Access Scheme, and these are the type of bonus points that you might get for hardship reasons, and that will be accepted across the board. I think across the board at universities. But yeah, they're the only ones which we accept. So that's all the frequently asked questions that we commonly get. I'll just check. No, haven't had any more questions in the chat room. As I mentioned, if anyone does have any more questions, first and foremost, check out the website for more information. Download the brochures that are on the website. And if all else fails, of course, come to our open day on September 1st. And if all else fails, then come into contact our co-op office and we'll be able to answer any questions that you might have. So thank you for your time and best of luck with your HSC.